All right. So first of all, I want to welcome all of you to the 2020 Fly North Dakota Conference. It's great to see everybody in person, so thank you so much if you came in person. It's great to see people brought together because of aviation, and so we're just really happy to have you here. My name is Kyle Wanner. I'm the Executive Director for the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission. And I want to welcome all of you to our 2022 Aerial Applicator Safety Meeting. We're also recording the event for those aerial applicators that are not in attendance today. And so if you're watching online, please remember to complete the online questionnaire after the video to ensure that we receive notice that you have watched this video. And so with that, I would like to go through a couple things with you before I turn it over to our first speaker. One of the first things I want to update everybody on is we have a new licensing specialist, Janelle Peterson. Welcome to our agency. She's been with us for over a year now, and so we're happy to have her. She's doing a great job with us. This is her contact information on the email. If you have any questions, if you need to walk through any of the material on the licensing requirements, please give her a call. I'm always available as well. We're really here to help you get through this process. She's going to be the one holding your application in case there are items that still have not been completed. But she is doing a great job, and our goal is to work with you to try to get everything done as quickly as possible. So make sure to contact her with any questions. One of the other things I wanted to discuss is the safety meeting requirements of aerial applicators, because there's been some confusion throughout the years in regards to what those are. And so there's actually two different safety requirements that the state of North Dakota has. One of them is with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture. And so to receive your Air Corps requirements through NDSU, you need to attend the PASS program at least once every 3 years. And so that's something that everybody, all of our aerial applicator pilots need to be aware of, that you are aware of. I know as you're going through the PASS program. So again, it's once every 3 years, and that's a Department of Agriculture requirement. The Aeronautics Commission, for your aerial applicator license, we require that you attend one annual safety meeting event, and that's a requirement of an operator or a chief pilot, so we don't necessarily require that of all pilots. And so we want to ensure that every operator receives some educational value, some information that they can pass on to the rest of their pilots every year. And so you can do that through PASS, and you can also do that by attending this session or watching this session online. And so that's important. It's important to kind of distinguish between the two. The Department of Agriculture requires PASS one every 3 years, and we require an annual safety meeting every year, but it's of an operator or of chief pilot, and it can be either this meeting or it can be PASS. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay. Some other reminders. Our aerial applicator aircraft in North Dakota, all of the aircraft that are spraying in North Dakota need to be registered with the state, and they must be listed on your license. And so if you have any changes throughout the season, if all of a sudden your operation is adding new pilots or aircraft that are coming in to help you for a week or two, please make sure you're calling our office and making sure those aircraft are registered in the state and are listed on that license. We have been getting reports in the past where I have found operators that are not legally licensed or registered to fly in the state, and then we have to take care of that. And so let's just make sure that the good communication is there. Janelle is great to work with, like I said, so it's not a big deal at all just to give us a call or shoot us an email with the updates that we can add onto your license. Something else I want to mention is that the decal requirement has actually been removed. And so you're no longer required to put that decal on your aircraft. I know there's been grumblings in the past about placing that decal on some expensive aircraft. And so the Aeronautics Commission deliberated, and in our recent administrative rule update, we removed that requirement. And so so you don't have to worry about the decal. You do need to have the license paperwork, in that aircraft when you're flying. But it's also important to note that even though your aircraft doesn't have the decal, we know which aircraft are legally licensed to be flying around the state. We have a database when we're doing airport inspections, or we're getting phone calls. We know if that aircraft is on a licensure. So that's one of the reasons we don't need the decal, is that if the aircraft are listed on the license, we know if that's a legally authorized aerial applicator in the state. And I did mention the pilots, so again, if you had any pilots, make sure to let us know about that. One of the recent changes that our office has been looking at over the last 2 years, we worked with the Aerial Applicator Association, and we went through a public comment period to update the licensure requirements to allow the licensing of small unmanned aircraft for aerial application. So that's new this year, so it's going to actually take effect for the first time on April 1st. And so all applicators will have the opportunity, or all companies, individuals, to apply for a U.S. aerial applicator license. So what does that entail? So if you're going to apply for a license for a U.S. aerial application license, you need your Part 137. Your pilots need to have their Part 107, so the remote pilot license. They have to go through the Air Corps ground pesticide certification through NDSU, so they understand how to utilize chemicals. Then you need to provide any waivers to us that you're going to be utilizing for any unmanned aircraft that require waivers to be operated through the FAA. I guess some other things to mention is your pilots, before they can provide aerial application solo, they need to have gone through some training. They need at least 10 hours of training with loads, actually spraying those chemicals with those unmanned aircraft. So those are a couple of things that are required. Please work with us if you're interested in receiving an unmanned aerial applicator license. This is new, this year. So I guess the other thing that's really important to mention is the weight. So it's for unmanned aircraft 500 pounds and less than that. So it's limited. So that's important to note. The other thing that is important to note, it's a separate license requirement. And so as a manned aerial applicator, that's a separate license. If you also, as a manned operator, want to have a license for unmanned, there are some different requirements. And so, like I said, you need your remote pilot certification. We need to know that you have utilized unmanned aircraft in the spraying environment, things like that. But you can receive both those licenses as a manned operator. So you can be a manned commercial operator, and you can be a unmanned operator as well. They are two different licenses. There's one fee. And so if you're already paying the $200 fee for a manned and you want to be unmanned, it's not an extra $200. It's just, we're just going to go through the motions to make sure that you're meeting all those requirements in that way as well. Any questions on that for the audience? And again, if you have any questions on this new license process, feel free to give us a call at the Aeronautics Commission. Our goal really is to help people to get into this industry, but to do it in a safe manner. And so we're really happy to work with you to work through what is needed to make sure that if this is an area that you're interested in working in, that we can make it happen. And I know there's been questions in the past on the chemical and the label use for unmanned aircraft. We have a great relationship with the Department of Agriculture. Aubrey is here today actually to talk about some updates from their agency. And so, our goal at the Aeronautics Commission is and has always been to make sure that aeronautical safety exists, that the operations that are ongoing are safe, and that the appropriate level of training has been done. But when it comes to the chemical side, we want the operators to partner with the Department of Agriculture and the EPA to ensure that that the appropriate label and chemical use is being done. Some other things I wanted to mention, we have some great website tools. Just a reminder on those. Our website has the Met Tower database, and so all of the different towers that are going up to monitor the speed of the air for any future wind towers. They're up on our website, so you can check that out for safety analysis. The Department of Agriculture has a great sensitive area map where you can look at apiaries, vineyards, organic crops. So just a reminder that it's always good to check those out. Our office works hand in hand with our airports around the state to maintain our weather reporting systems, our AWOS systems. There are 35 around the state, which is just incredible. If you go back 10 years, we've come a really long way in increasing the amount of weather availability for pilots. Our office actually works to maintain 24 of those systems, and we will be adding BOTNO this spring. So that's another enhancement to our system when it comes to aviation weather. Just a reminder too, once we go into the spring and summer months, it's also construction season in North Dakota. And so be on the lookout for NOTAMs and any pavement projects that may shut down a public use airport for a short duration of time. Just for your information, Beach, Carrington, and Glen Ullin are 3 runways that may be closed this season. We will be bidding those projects this season, so given the bidding climate out there right now, it's really challenging, so those projects may not happen this year, but they may. So it's one of those things where just be aware that those are 3 runways that at some point will be shut down, whether that's in 2022 or in 2023 for major rehabilitation work. We're also looking at some apron and taxiway work in Lisbon and Washburn, and we have some seal coats that are planned in Garrison, Edgeley, Mandan, Partial, and Rolla. And there may be others as well, so this isn't an inclusive list because we're working on projects as we speak. And so just a reminder to check NOTAMs and plan ahead when it comes to airport work. Just for fun, to give you a historical perspective and some statistical information, this graph is showing all of the acres that have been sprayed in each year going back to 1983. Our office tracks, so we appreciate all of the aerial applicators at the end of the season that report to us their acreage. That's a requirement, so just a reminder, if you haven't done that for last season, you need to do that prior to getting your license for 2022. Looking back at 2021, it was a rough year for our applicators. We were down about 1 million acres per our average. So we had about 2.5 million acres sprayed in 2021, and 3.5 million is the 10-year average, which, it was a drier year, so that can be expected. But hopefully, with crop prices rising, and we hopefully will have a wet season, and it'll be a busy one. So here's looking for 2022. Some additional statistical information just for fun. I graphed all of the different aerial applicator licenses that our state has provided since 1983. That is the red or the orange line. As you can see, going back to 1983, there used to be over 200 aerial applicators in the state, and that has since dwindled down to right around 100 in recent years. In 2021, we had 95 aerial applicators in the state. And then when you look at the amount of aircraft in the state as well, there used to be close to 400 aerial applicator aircraft being used in the state back in 1985, and today we're down to about 188, which is something that everybody sees around the industry. We've seen a consolidation in the aerial applicator business. We're seeing less aircraft, but larger aircraft, turbine aircraft that can hold more chemical. And so you can see by the last slide, we're still doing the same amount of chemical distribution with less pilots and less aircraft. But it is important to be aware of some changes that are ongoing in the industry. And we're aware of the workforce shortages that are also available. And we have a lot of great aviation education programs that we've been working with the state's aviation association on. We're working with the high schools around the state to have some aviation curriculum implemented. And so, we're always eager if there's other ideas from the North Dakota Aerial Applicator Association or others to enhance and promote the aerial applicator industry to try to get more people interested in this field. So if you have any ideas, we'd love to hear that as well. So before I turn it over, are there any questions that anybody has for me? Okay, well then our next speaker is going to be Aubrey Sondral, who's going to give you an update from the Department of Agriculture. So let's give her a hand.
Perfect. All right, well, while we get the presentation going here, just to clarify what Department of Agriculture's role in and what all of you guys do is we are responsible for the chemical side of things. So Department of Agriculture upholds the law in relation to pesticides. Perfect. And so we do have inspectors scattered throughout the state, and likely you guys have met yours. I know that aerial applicators are one that, you're very much so in the public's eye, you're very much so in our eyes, because there's not as many of you guys as there are other types of applicators. So don't be surprised if you meet your inspector, if they have questions and want to talk to you. My role with Department of Agriculture is purely educational. So I'm sort of your neutral, helpful person to make sure that you're following the law. I don't have any enforcement authority, but what I do have is the ability to come meet you wherever you're at in the state and make sure that everything's in order for you so that you pass all the inspections. We want to make sure we're not really about giving fines, we're about making sure everyone stays safe. So a couple of things that we've noticed over the past year. there were 2 drift violations among our aerial applicators last year, which is of course too many. So a couple of things that I just wanted to remind you all of is watch for that label language in association with aerial drift reduction. Usually the label does go into some detail about how to reduce drift with aerial applications, so make sure you read that really thoroughly. Even if it's a product that you've read a million times, you feel really comfortable applying it, still apply it, thoroughly sit down, read that label, and make sure that you know what all you're supposed to do. Another reminder is that rates are typically different between aerial applicators and ground applicators, so make sure that you use the rate that's appropriate for you and the way you're applying. And then make sure your equipment is calibrated and properly working. Another thing to keep in mind in terms of drift is much more likely if there's a temperature inversion present. Of course, normally the air gets cooler with the rise in altitude, but when an air temperature inversion is present, air gets warmer with a rise in altitude. So a couple of things that you can look for. Of course, if you drive by a factory of some sort and the smog is level with the ground, that's one indication. If there's fog without any standing water, clear sky with little or no wind. If there's smoke from wildfires from the west, for example, it might move laterally with no wind. And usually in a temperature inversion, there's very little wind. So if the wind is between like 0 and 3 miles per hour, that's kind of something to keep an eye on. If you drive down some gravel roads, there might be dust hanging over the road, and even sounds might be easier to hear from far away. So if you have some seasonal employees who come to North Dakota, just make sure that they familiarize themselves with the North Dakota state laws. We do accept reciprocity from other states, but every state is actually very variable in the pesticide law. So make sure that you have your employees sit down and read through. I do have some yellow pamphlets in the back with North Dakota state law, so make sure that they're familiar with what they need to do. If you have employees coming down from Canada for the summer, they're gonna need to fully take the test for North Dakota state law. They cannot utilize reciprocity. And make sure that your employees both have the aerial core and agricultural pests. So those are the 2 certifications that you have to have. All right, some other information in relation to compliance. If you're applying paraquat, just make sure you got the additional training. This training does not suffice, nor your certification through the state. You go to the EPA website and just do that paraquat training online. It takes about 45 minutes. And if you're ever applying in tribal lands, there's also additional certification for that. It's very simple. You just go to Google, type in pesticides tribal lands. It'll pop up. It's a little form that you fill out. You use your state certification number and then snail mail ship that off to US EPA Region 8. And if you're on tribal lands and you encounter someone who doesn't look familiar to you, that is an EPA certified inspector, so please be nice to them. I've had a couple of people say, I just got pulled over by someone who doesn't work for the state, and I'm a little confused at how that happened. That's because they're EPA folks. And then just make sure that you're filling out your records completely. We've missed some of that. Some folks forget to go back and sign, for example. So I'm just going to show you an example form here and a couple of things folks have forgotten to do. Make sure that you put the equipment that you use down, and that would include the PPE that you used. And the EPA registration number instead of the product name. There are product names that are extremely similar, and so it's really important you use the EPA registration number. And then a legal description of the land. I think you guys are much better at that than our ground applicators, but you might know where Joe's farm is at. We don't. Has to be section, township, range, GPS coordinate, or an address. And then, like I said, make sure that you go back and sign your application forms and put your certification number on there too. All right, this is just kind of a helpful tool for you guys because you are very much so in the eyes of the public, and we know that the public is kind of watching you. You're fun to watch when you're out flying, for example. There can be people kind of concerned with what you're doing. So this is a really nice tool. You can just go on here and print out fact sheets about what you're doing. They have them all prepared for you. They've got all kinds of different products and even stuff related to pets, people, and it's just a really fabulous tool called InPick. And they even have an information line if you have concerned citizens that they could call and get information from. So I really like using this. You know, have a couple of handouts with you. You could just shove them in somebody's mailbox if year after year you're getting the complaints from the same person, for example. Just an easy way to be able to ease their concerns. A couple of other things the department has been working on. We do a water quality study annually. Application on many pesticides is illegal or restricted near surface water, so just keep that in mind. And if you're going to be applying directly to surface water, make sure that you apply for a permit from NDDEQ 20 days in advance. It used to be Department of Health, and they no longer handle that. So make sure you go to NDDEQ's website. And then I want to go over 2020's surface water study with you just really briefly. We took a look at our surface water and measured in nearly every river basin across the state. And we found these numbers. These are just pesticides we're saying we found, not at the level that we found them. So they can be very, very tiny amounts, but we're saying it was present in the water. At that, our most common detections are atrazine, 2,4-D, bentazone, and metolachlor. And if we hone in on that just a little bit, we look at a conservative value set by the EPA called the Aquatic Life Benchmark. That's a level saying no effects on the most sensitive species. If we look at that, anything that is above that amount, we consider an exceedance. Atrazine, imidacloprid, and metolachlor tend to be products that are in that. So just a reminder, if you or anyone you know uses atrazine, you gotta look very closely at the water restrictions on the label. So pay a lot of attention to that and those buffer zones required. Another thing that we look at, actually Kyle mentioned it earlier, we do have a North Dakota pollinator plan and a map that you all can use to contact your local pollinator folks out there. You know, pesticides and bees, they don't normally go hand in hand, and it takes a lot of effort on everybody's part to make that work. So what we did is we put out a pollinator plan for y'all. That includes information on how to reduce the likelihood that your application will impact bees. And then we also created this interactive bee map, so I'll show you what it looks like. There's two ways you can access it. First of all, you can sign up for the program yourself. If you sign up for the program, what you'll do is when you have an application, go in, put where it's gonna be at, what you're gonna be applying and when, and it'll automatically send out an email to all the beekeepers within a 2-mile range. So that's really nice because it meets the requirement for a notification very easily. If you don't wanna do that, you can still get the information from the local beekeepers, like their phone number, by hitting that sensitive area map, which is what was shown to you earlier. So that looks like this. You go in, it's also got vineyards, unorganic, select one of the dots or squares, and it's gonna pop up with the phone number so that you can get them on the horn and tell them about their application. This is really important because it gives beekeepers an opportunity to cover their hives or move them if they need to. So this is something that's going to be coming up a lot more often, threatened and endangered species. The Biden administration's taking this very seriously, and as new product registrations are coming through, this section is being added to labels. So we want you to be aware of it. Right now, it's not necessarily impacting you aerial applicators so much because here in North Dakota, the only product that we have currently impacted by this is over-the-top dicamba. But like I said, as product registrations come through, we're seeing more and more of this. So I do expect that there's a possibility you will be impacted in the future by this. So just wanted to make you aware. What you have to do when this section of the label appears on your product is visit a website called Bulletins Live 2, and the label will give you a link directly to it. This is what it looks like. You'll go in, put your application month in, and then hit search. It'll pop up like this. Anywhere on the map that's in a pink area up here is a pesticide use limitation area, just saying that that product might have a possible impact on threatened and endangered species and their habitat. So if you're using this pesticide, you have to have an additional buffer, for example. There's an extra thing that you have to do to be compliant. So all you do is hit the printable bulletin button, and it gives you all the information that you need. So here it shows you what areas are impacted, the different products that are included in it, and then what you have to do additionally to the label to be compliant. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is Project SafeSend, and we can go into some more information that I've learned about drones here too in a second. But for Project SafeSend this year, we're having the 30th anniversary of it. If you have been to it before, you know what we do. We accept unusable pesticides. So we did just recently have a press release that came out, and we're not going to be accepting chlorpyrifos, but please hold tight. I promise that we are going to be looking into a solution for you guys. If you do have chlorpyrifos on hand, what we're recommending right now is that you look at your label and see if there's a use outside of a food item that you could apply to, or you can contact your registrant and see if they'll relabel the product, or even if they have a way that they can use it themselves. So that's what we're recommending you do for now. Otherwise, hold tight to your chlorpyrifos. We are going to be looking for a solution of some sort. But if you have something other than chlorpyrifos, we accept all other pesticides. We don't accept rinsate adjuvants, fertilizers, and empty containers. We have a limit of 5,000 pounds per participant. And it would just be really helpful because we have a contractor who comes and does all this work for us. And so if you have more than 1,000 pounds, it's good to give them a heads up so that they have space for you for that day. So if you have more than that, just give me a call, 2 weeks or so in advance. And to do that, I will give you my contact information right here. Another thing that's come up recently is drones. So I just kind of want to talk with you briefly about what I know about drones. Folks who are applying with the drones, they're going to need to have the egg pest and aerial core certification just like you guys. And what we're encouraging them to do right now is to use the aerial application information on the label. The EPA is very aware that drones are going to be more prevalent in this industry, so they're going to be working on some label language in the future related to drones. But the EPA's processes can be a little bit slow, no surprises there, right? So it might take a minute, so just hold tight. Like I said, we're recommending that folks use the aerial applicator information and rates for now. But if you have questions about a specific product with drones, just feel free to give me a call and I promise I'll look into it for you. So, yep, here's my phone number and email, and I can pass it back to you.
Any questions at all for
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Jump in here. Thank you. Great presentation. I appreciate all of your assistance as we navigate particularly the unmanned aircraft world, of which we're going to get an update right now from Jakey Stoltz from the Northern Plains UAS test site. So let's give him a hand. There you go, sir.
Thank you. All right. Good to be back after a virtual kind of skip year there. So I think I know most of you in the room, but there might be like one or two of you. So I'm Jakey Stoltz, Dickinson native, went to UND for the UAS program. I do have all my manned licenses though. Spent a couple years at UND flight instructing. But the goal was always UAS. So I started with test site pretty much right after they were designated as a test site by the FAA. Recently held the Director of Operations role there, but last summer I transitioned over to a new role that we have working with the state agencies, municipalities in North Dakota specifically. So now I reside in Bismarck to kind of be closer to all the state agency headquarters there. And then really quick on the test sites, again, in case you're not familiar, so there was an FAA competitive selection process around 2011 and 12, and they picked 6 test sites at that time. North Dakota was one of them. That was awarded to Department of Commerce. So one of the original goals of this all was to just generate kind of this new industry in North Dakota. We've always had energy and ag. And so now, looking at like technology and autonomy and specifically drones. So that was one of the big initiatives that we still have today is driving kind of that industry in the state here. Okay, so getting to topics here. So I'm going to give a quick kind of national look at drones. There's kind of 2 big things happening, and then related to this new North Dakota UAS aerial applicator law, I wanted to give kind of a bigger picture, like nationally, what's happening in this space. And then we'll bring it into North Dakota and talk a little bit about Vantis, which is a project that's kind of near and dear to our hearts that's going to really impact the UAS industry in North Dakota here. So nationally, I think last year in the virtual aerial applicator video, I probably touched really briefly on this. This was new in 2021 from the FAA Remote ID. So what this is, as just a really quick refresher, is kind of this digital license plate for drones. So the idea is that drones will broadcast kind of a standardized set of information, like where the drone is, its position, altitude, where the pilot is, some unique identifier like the registration number. And this is for primarily for like law enforcement, the FAA, NTSB, those types of organizations to help kind of keep track of activities, maybe find those people that are using them in the wrong way, and just really drive some accountability in the industry. So when that was put out last year, there was some deadlines pretty far in the future, and we're getting closer to one of those. So in Q3 of this year, that's when manufacturers have to start actually building this technology into their drones. And so it'll be another year, Q3 of 2023, before operators actually have to comply. So next year's aerial applicator meeting, we'll be talking about maybe some of the equipment that's available now and how to buy it and use it. But the first deadline coming up in September of this year is just for the manufacturers to actually start building their drones with this technology in it. So that's kind of coming up. The next kind of big thing that's going on behind the scenes is the FAA established a Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee, an ARC we like to call it. And so if you're not familiar with ARCs, they're really kind of the first step towards new regulations kind of out in the future. So the FAA kicked this off, and they brought together a bunch of different stakeholders. This one happens to be particularly big. Stakeholders from the drone industry, like manufacturers, the operators, all the companies making like different technology for drones, they're all part of this. We have like groups representing cities and governments, because they're obviously involved. They're the ones seeing the drone operations occur in their cities and jurisdictions. There's definitely manned, kind of traditional manned groups that are part of that. The helicopter associations, ALPAs, and all these groups have been basically talking for like the last 8 to 9 months to develop a set of recommendations for the FAA on Beyond Visual Line of Sight and how that would work. So this is really just, again, kind of that first opportunity for industry to say, hey, here's how we think maybe you could make some rules for this new technology. They'll deliver a set of recommendations to the FAA very soon, so this year, and then that'll kind of kick off a process where the FAA, takes all that in and just kind of digests and looks at what they can actually do in that rulemaking space. So we're still quite a ways out from like an actual rule coming out for UAS Beyond Visual Line of Sight operations, but this is a good first step to getting there. Okay, so UAS aerial applicating. So again, this is just kind of a national look, and I hope maybe it provides a little context on why the North Dakota law is important and really timely here, because essentially the industry is really booming. And so I'm going to show just a couple of graphs that have some statistics based on the FAA exemption process. So really, just about all UAS aerial applicators have to go through this. They have to get an FAA exemption to do spraying. They also have to do the 137 process generally. But the exemptions are put on the federal docket, so you can actually go look at them and read them and kind of get insights into what's going on in the space. So I've been tracking these for a couple of years and just thought it'd be interesting to kind of put some stats behind this. So the first one, just this graph here just kind of shows the exponential growth and activity that we're seeing. So like 2018 and years before that, even 2019, on the left side there, just not a lot of activity going on, maybe a couple like requests and approvals a year. And then we see 2020, it's just been growing like crazy ever since then. So even in the Q1 of this year, or just January, February, March, we've seen more requests and approvals than like really anything before 2020 combined. And somebody already kind of pointed out to me that the red trend line really should be an exponential curve, which I definitely agree with. It's just really booming. Some interesting maybe things here. So generally before 2021, you can see the gold and the green line follow each other pretty closely. You're always going to see the issues kind of lag behind the request. So you put your request in. It takes maybe 30 days to 6 months, depending on what you're asking for. So you see maybe a quarter or two delay, and then the FAA makes that issuance. But if you look at Q1 of 2022, the gold line just really skyrockets here. And so we would expect the next quarter here for the green line to catch up, but it'll be interesting to see if the FAA has the bandwidth to kind of keep up with the demand. We don't have like a UAS rule set for aerial applicating. The FAA has done a good job on providing guidance on how to get through this process. The AC-137 has even been updated for UAS, but they still have to approve every single one of them just about. So it's a workload on their part that they have to work through. But just really, again, a lot of growth in the space. So where's the growth happening? So location-wise, we're seeing California, Texas. Those are probably not too surprising, just really heavily populated states. But Missouri, Iowa, probably maybe states that you wouldn't expect just based on population. Of course, these are big ag states, so that's a good reason why. But North Dakota we're in there. We're not at the bottom, but we're not at the top either. And so again, I think that's why this North Dakota law is just really timely. Provide a lot of clarification for UAS applicators in the state here to get licensed and get spraying. So hopefully we see that number increase here in the coming years. And then on the right side, what kind of drones are we seeing out there? So not really surprising that DJI is kind of dominating this space as well. They have a series called the Agorist, and they've got like almost a dozen models in that space right now. But we're seeing like T30, T20, T16, and MG1 are the foremost popular. There's another brand called Hylio that's starting to gain some ground, but just not nearly at the level DJI is. The heaviest approval to date is the Yamaha at 273 pounds, that aircraft. The next closest is the Agorist T30 at 172. And that represents about an 8-gallon payload for those of you that are kind of interested. So these aircraft are not spraying at the scale of manned aircraft. But I think there's just a really complementary set of use cases, really just targeted spraying maybe for weeds or mosquitoes or just things that maybe manned aircraft are a little too big for, right? So I think they're really complementary in that sense. There are some requests in the works for much larger aircraft, 500,000 pounds. Some of these companies have been working on this for up to like 2 years. So this is not, there is a significant hurdle to get past the FAA just to prove your airworthiness and your aircraft's capabilities and your training and all that. So the FAA is not really taking this lightly, especially these larger. The larger they get, just the higher the bar gets for these. But there are some that are working towards that. And as the kind of the final note here, we are seeing some one-to-many, some swarming approvals that are out there right now. That's typically the smaller drones and maybe like 2 to 3 at a time. We're not seeing like swarms of 10 or 20 or a lot, but usually like 2 to 3 aircraft. Guys are getting approvals for that just to cover a little more ground at the same time. So any questions kind of nationally on UAS, what's going on there for aerial application? Okay. Okay, so bringing that in now just to North Dakota, and I'm not really going to recover any of that North Dakota law, but I'm going to kind of switch gears to our Vantis initiative, and apologize if Any of you were at the Tri-State Aerial Applicator about a week and a half ago, you probably saw some of this, but we just like talking about it, so you're going to get it again if you hear it. Okay, so what is Vantis? So the idea is just the infrastructure to enable advanced and beyond visual line of sight operations, UAS operations across the state of North Dakota. So in previous years when we've been here, we've maybe talked about like specific projects going on or specific types of operations kind of scoped in. But this initiative really kind of changes the discussion to all use cases. So we're really not here talking about just maybe ag drone operations or just delivery or whatever. We're talking about all of them: high altitude, low altitude, large UAS, small UAS. We're hoping this infrastructure really enables all of that across the state. So what is Vantis? So we kind of break it down into 4 different parts. Top left, we look at remote infrastructure. I'll have some pictures to show these in a little bit, but kind of just narrating it for a bit. The remote infrastructure is our sensors that are physically deployed out there in the state, and we do have some installed around the Wofford City area right now. But these are things like our radios. So we're going to have a radio network that talks to the drone and enables more robust communication. We have surveillance sensors. So this right now is in the form of radars and ADS-B receivers. This is all, of course, to detect the manned aircraft flying out there so that we can give way. All of these sensors that are installed out there are connected through a backhaul data network. So right now we're using North Dakota StageNet. That's the fiber ring that essentially goes all around the state and is run by the state. And so all of those sensors are physically connected to that. And that data is all put to our Mission Network Operations Center, which is in the bottom right there. So that's a physical building in Grand Forks that we just completed last fall. It's kind of a cool building. So if you think like command center with just walls of screens, that's exactly kind of what we're talking about here. So whenever there's an operation on the network going on, there's staff at this building monitoring all the different components. So they're monitoring the radios and the radars, making sure they're working properly. They're monitoring the operations to make sure that everybody's using the network properly. If something were to like break down or maybe go out of spec, they'll have maintenance capabilities out of there. So this is really just that central place that's monitoring this entire network and making sure it's running. And then of course we have the aircraft. So something's actually got to fly on this. And we put this as part of the network because the aircraft will have to have like additional capabilities beyond what you might just go to Best Buy and buy. So this is really a step up from kind of that Part 107 DJI type of aircraft environment. Operators are going to have to equip their aircraft with potentially like special radios that are compatible with this. They may have to have certain capabilities on their ground control station to display the radar data so they can see what's going on out there. And even just something as simple as like logging into the network. So this isn't just something that you can kind of onboard yourself. You actually have to work with us to get access to it, and we'll make sure you're trained and onboarded appropriately. So the unmanned aircraft is definitely going to be a big part of that, and it'll be kind of a step up from what we're seeing out there today. Okay, so let me get to some pictures quick, and I'll get the 2022 update at the end. So right now, this picture depicts what we call our Keysight. So Wofford City is kind of middle, bottom left there, and that's kind of to center yourself here, the Missouri River and Lake Sakakawea. So there's a lot of different rings on here, and these all depict like the different ranges of our technology, our infrastructure. So again, we have like some radios. How far can those provide reliable communication to an aircraft? We have radars. How far can they reliably see aircraft? And when you combine all these different ranges and capabilities, you get to what's called a service volume, and that's what's in the purple. So the purple area is actually where we would go fly. And within that volume, you're guaranteed certain performance from the network, certain connection, latency. You can see all the aircraft you need to see, and so on. So this would be kind of like your cell phone service map. You know, you have different shades of red, 3G, 4G, 5Gs, dead zones. That's kind of the same idea here. We want to make sure we're operating where the infrastructure actually covers us. Okay, and then there's two, like, I guess cell tower 3, there's a pin kind of on the upper right in the Watford City itself. So that's what these next pictures depict, is like what physically is at these locations. So in both of these pictures, we have radars. That's kind of the horizontal kind of dish-looking thing there. So that's our Terma radar. So that is just spinning and detecting. It's specifically tuned to detect manned aircraft, specifically like 172 size. So we're concerned most at the moment with that size of aircraft, crop dusters, general aviation, helicopters, and so on. But those radars are, again, connected all to the network. We do have ADS-B receivers at each site, and then a C2 radio. And on the left picture, there's North Dakota DOT tower. So in some cases, we're trying to reuse state infrastructure and not, build our own towers everywhere that we need to. So we're installing the radios in some cases on DOT towers. They're already there. They're already connected to StageNet. It just makes sense to reuse those. So that's physical infrastructure that's out there right now. We've been testing all summer. It's effectively operational. And then on the front, on the left side, you can see one of the aircraft that we've been testing with. Okay, so this is a picture of the display. So that radar data and ADS-B actually has to go somewhere so a pilot can see it and actually use that data. So this display probably looks similar. It actually comes from a manned product from Pario called Keysight. They've tweaked it a little bit to have a couple extra UAS features. But it's kind of cool to see some of that manned technology coming over to the unmanned side. So this is similar to, maybe you all are familiar with like ForeFlight, or more familiar with that. Kind of the same idea, a lot of the same symbology and same colors. And it just kind of looks like an aviation display that way. So we reused that. And this is where again, the US pilot will be watching this during the flight. And if those radars or ADS-B are picking up some aircraft that's displayed here, and then the pilots are trained with certain kind of logic and procedures based on what's out there. If they need to maneuver out of the way of something, this display will help them do that. So, and then a couple pictures of our Mission Network Operations Center. These are actually kind of out of date. So again, the facility is finished. It's operational at this point. The upper right picture is a little bit underwhelming compared to what we have there. So he had like 3 monitors, but we literally have a full wall of monitors at this point to monitor the network. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, that's a physical building in Grand Forks where all of this infrastructure is connected into and monitored. Okay, so finally, just kind of 2022 plans. So the upper left there, kind of the orange, again, that's where we have our Keysight. So that equipment and infrastructure is installed and operational. We're working right now on our first Beyond Vision Line of Sight flights with the FAA and all the different stakeholders. So we expect just more of that activity to occur here in the spring and summer. And then at the moment, the team is also looking at the next deployment site. So on the right side there, this is all kind of notional, right? But the next area we're looking at, where are we putting this next? So again, the goal is to get across the whole state. So we're currently looking at kind of that Fargo, South Red River Valley area as our next deployment area, and that's all being kind of discussed and formulated right now. But we're just going to start expanding, one location at a time. And over 10 years, hopefully we've got the whole state covered to really make good use of this. So that is all I have. Any questions?
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jakey.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Great presentation, a lot of good information. I've known Jakey and all the staff at the Northern Plains US Test Site for a very long time. Our agency works hand in hand with them to work on these issues, and so they're just doing a great job. A lot of really exciting things. So I really appreciate you being here today to give those updates to the group. And our next presenters, you next, Andy, or Perry, you want to be next?
Perry will be first.
Okay, so we're going to bring up Perry Oshner from the Fargo FSDO, and then Andy Tybert, Aerial Applicator and President for the North Dakota Aerial Applicator Association, is going to join him to give some updates as well. So let's pull up. There we go. Yeah. There. Let's jump all the way back for him. There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. See your arrow up, arrow down. There we go. Well, good afternoon. I'm Perry Osher from the Fargo FSDO. I've been in the FAA now about 9 years or so. Originally started at the Des Moines FSDO and transferred here about 7 years ago. I work on the airworthiness side of the house, and over the course of the seasons we have operators that ask questions. We try and keep track of those, and one of those that kind of comes up repetitively are base inspections, 137 base inspections, what you can expect and how that operation works. So I'm going to explain that a little bit, and hopefully when we're done you'll have a better understanding of how we do that and how we pick the certain people that we're going to do the base inspection on. So one of the things you can expect, we do on-site inspections, face-to-face, virtual inspections, which some of you have already been through due to the COVID-19 pandemic thing. We did resort to doing some of the base inspections virtually, and it worked out very well for both the operator and the FAA. We actually had operators that requested that we not come out during the height of this thing when there was a lot of confusion and there were real heavy CDC guidelines. Some of the operators just said, look, I'm a one-man show, and the last thing I need is you guys coming out here and bringing that stuff to my operation. I get sick, and the operation is just not going to function until I get better. So the virtual inspection actually worked out pretty well. And then we'll talk a little bit about scheduling. So this will be the base inspection, what you need to know, what you can expect. So our objective is obviously when we're done that you'll have a better understanding of what's required and contacting the FAA if you have questions. One thing I'll say about contacting the FAA, in the past there's been a lot of operators that just don't want to call us. And we actually, this office loves to work with our operators, whether they be 135, 137, 91, any of the 133 guys. We work with them all. So I really encourage the operators to give us a call at any time. We'd love to talk about airworthiness issues, ADs, any questions you have on proposed rulemakings, operational questions. Our management is great there, and they'll get you in touch with somebody that's going to be able to answer your questions. So I really encourage you to give us a call. So how it all works. We are on a national work program, so we're assigned, every principal inspector in our office, we're assigned certain operators. They try and make it as even as possible. Ideally, we're to see 20% of our operators every year. That works out to be the 5-year plan. So to answer a lot of the questions that we get from the operators, you are actually selected randomly. It doesn't come from our office. As I said here, it's generated by a top secret government program within Washington, D.C. And they actually make the choice. Now, a lot of operators have been selected multiple years, and they'll ask us, well, why are you coming out again? It's not that I don't love to see you every year, but why are you coming out again when my inspection was excellent the last year? Well, this automated program for some reason, the automation hasn't been working, and it repeats itself. So there are times when we'll see you 3 years in a row, and we're trying to fix that, and that's working at the speed of government. So anytime that should work out really well. But ideally, we'll see you once every 5 years. Now, we do have the option, if we have findings, and we feel that there's safety items we'll see you again that year, or we'll see you again the next year based on what the outcome is, or we'll do, the pop-in. So one thing I want to talk about as far as the scheduling, the FAA does have a deadline. So when we get our work program, management likes to see us go see the operators and be done with this work program at least by the end of August. Now ideally, we'll want to get this done way ahead of time so we don't have to bother you while you're working, but unfortunately sometimes that happens. So the process is you'll get the phone call, you'll get a letter, or you'll get an email where your principal is trying to schedule your base inspection. Oftentimes it's really hard to get a hold of some of you guys because you might be in Phoenix, or you might be doing something that's you're out of the game for a while, you're vacationing or living in your winter home, whatever. But I would suggest that you try and get a hold of us, try and return the phone call, and try and line up the date that we can come out and do the inspection. It really helps it go fast, and then we don't have to try and track you down to get this done. We'll come out and do the face-to-face inspection, or we'll offer you the virtual inspection, and we send that out by a letter or the email. And of course, we're allowed to do the pop-ins. Where we're out driving around, we may have seen an operator in your area. We'll see that your base is just right off the road. We'll stop in and say hello, and a lot of you guys will welcome us. We'll have coffee, we'll talk about any issues that you have. If you're not working and the airplane's available, we may do a ramp inspection if we haven't seen you in a while, and those are pretty quick and painless. So this is a copy of the letter that we send out. And it's just to inform you that your agricultural operation is due for inspection, and we reference the Reg 137.59, and because of the pandemic, we're offering you this inspection by a face-to-face or virtual. And the first part of the letter has to do with most of the ops side of the house, and the second part of the letter has to do with airworthiness, where we're asking for records and things like that. So, and we sign it sincerely here, T. Help, from the Flight Standards District Office. The regulation that we cite is 137.59, if you want to look it up. That's the inspection authority that we have. A lot of guys have not read that regulation. So it's basically saying each holder of the certificate, the operator, shall allow the administrator, the FAA, at any time and place to make the inspection. So that's our inspection authority. That's the reg that we stand on to do that. What we'll ask for in the letter is your original operating certificate, and that's the one that you have hanging on the wall, the one that's behind the coffee pot or buried below the starter generator that's on the table. But we'll look at it, and if it's a virtual inspection, we'll ask you to take a picture of it and send it along with the package that we're requesting. The operating certificate in accordance with 137.33. This is important. Now, this is the one, the copy that we ask you to have in the airplane. That's required by reg. And I'll get into that and the reason why you really need to have that in there. A spray record from the preceding 12 months. Here's one issue that I talked to Andy a little bit about. There are operators where we ask for this and we find out that you haven't been active for the last year. For whatever reason, you haven't sprayed. And there are times if we know the operator really well, we'll go back to management and they'll normally say, well, does he plan on spraying the next year? And if the answer is yes, we'll just wait and we'll do the inspection next year and kind of cut you some slack. But if you know that you may not be operating for the next couple of years or whenever, for whatever reason you have going on, that you're not going to be active, let us know, because then you really don't qualify to have the 137 certificate in accordance with the regulations. It's not a horrible thing if you plan on getting back into it, because what we'll ask you to do is let us suspend the certificate. And by suspension, we're just going to set it aside, let it hang, we'll send you a letter, and your certificate will be in suspense. If you decide in the next year or two that you're going to spray again, let us know. As long as you meet all the requirements of the reg with the airworthy airplane, the knowledge and skills, and your base of operations, and you have everything else you need to qualify to spray, it's about an hour's paper exercise for us, and we'll get you back operating with that certificate. It really is very painless, but it's better than letting it hang, even though I know it took a long time maybe to get the certificate, and that's why you don't want to give it up. Well, I'm here to say you're not giving it up. We're just going to suspend it temporarily, and then when you're back in action, paperwork issue, we'll get it back. It's not that big of a deal. This is the reg that cites that, the 137.33. Now, here's the thing. No person may operate an aircraft unless a facsimile or copy of the Agricultural Aircraft Operator Certificate under which the operation is conducted is carried on the aircraft. The copy shall be presented for inspection upon the request of the administrator or the federal, state, or local law enforcement officer. Here's why that's really important. Early in the season, when we do a ramp check, we'll find that the operating certificate, the airworthiness, the registration are not in the airplane. We know our operators well enough where they'll say it's in a book, the mechanic may have taken it out, but you'll get it, you'll produce it, and carry on. It won't be that big of a deal. But in an instance where you're not in our geographic region, you're spraying down south, helping somebody else out, there is a better than average chance that you're going to get ramped by another principal from another FAA office. If you don't have those documents with you, you're probably at least done for the day, if not done for the week, until you produce those documents that are required under this regulation. So what I would say is make sure that you make those copies and have them at the place where you're dispensing your chemical, or you're actually in violation. And most principals throughout the country will understand, and they'll work with you on it, and it's not going to be that big of a deal, but some may not. So just make the copies and make sure that they're in the airplane. The first half of that letter asks for the pilot records. You're all very familiar with this. I've seen the checklist that you guys have at the beginning of the year. Your pilot certificate, of course, it'll be signed on the back. And your medical certificate, we've had instances where on the virtual inspection where we've asked for a copy of the medical certificate, and the operator will have the secretary put these things together that we ask for, and they'll send a medical that's expired. And it happens quite a bit because they may staple it in the back of their logbook. They have a current medical, but they just forgot to replace the one that's expired. So for whatever reason we get one that's expired, we'll make the phone call and we'll get it corrected, but it would save a phone call if you check first and make sure that your medical is current, at least the one you're sending us, before you send it in. The logbook endorsement for the flight review, you all know where that's at. Your tail wheel endorsement, your high performance driver's license, economic poisons license, we've never had anybody miss any of those. The chief supervisor letter of competency from the FAA under logbook endorsement for the FAA is outlined in 14 CFR 137.19E. I know a lot of operators were beat to death on that, and some didn't know why they had to have the knowledge and skills endorsement in the book, but I believe everybody understands now why, and I believe all that's been taken care of, and we really haven't had to ask anybody for it since. The records part of it, to include your airworthiness certificate, your registration. We haven't had any issues with those except for sometimes you don't have them, but you always produce them. Logbook entries for the last 2 annual inspections. The ADs, we've never had any instance where we've had issues with ADs. All of the mechanics, at least nowadays, will have them in a really nice binder. The repetitives will be there, everything will be signed off. The previous complied with are all going to be there, so that's never been an issue as well. The documentation of major repairs and alterations. That's important. If it's been in the last year and you've had an STC installed in your airplane, or you've had some kind of major repair, the reason we ask for this, and we find this quite a bit, we'll see in the logbook entry that you've had an STC installed, and then we'll go back into the entry and we won't see the 337 that was supposed to be filled out. So we'll ask you about it. More often than not, you'll say, the mechanic hasn't, forgot to give it to me or forgot to put it in the book. And that usually is the case. Or the flip side of that, we'll find a 337 with no logbook entry. So we'll ask you about it, and you'll normally go back and you'll get the sticker that the mechanic produced. You forgot to put it in the book, whatever, but look for that. It's important that you have both documents when you have that 337 or that STC done. It's important to have that in there, or we'll ask you for it. Copies are allowed. For the virtual inspection, most operators have just been taking pictures with their phone, and we'll get GIF files, JPEG files. They'll fax. We'll have operators that'll make copies and send it by mail. It's all acceptable based on the technology that you have if you're going to do the virtual inspection part of it. There's a couple of websites, and I'll go through these really quick. The pilot safety one is a great one to go online and sign up for service bulletins, ADs, notifications. We just got one recently about Piper PA-12s. Maybe some of you have seen it, where the rudders, due to fatigue, have been falling off on float planes. Well, I know people that have PA-12s, and you may as well, so I get a hold of them and let them know if they've seen it. If you go online and you sign up for these, you'll get these notices, and they're really handy to have. The podcast, there's a podcast that we do called The Air Up There. It's excellent. There are times where the subject material won't matter, but there are other times where it's an excellent podcast, and it's worth the hour to take to listen to that. And then, of course, there's FAAsafety.gov. So, are there any questions on base inspections? Okay.
One quick comment on 337s. Probably the most prevalent one is people who had flaggers on airplanes. They took a 337 to put that flagger on there, and after they got GPS, the flagger got removed and set in the side of the hangar. And it also takes a 337 to remove that STC that was installed. So that's what I've seen several times, is that follow-up 337 is never produced. Yeah, that's pretty typical, because a lot of even the mechanics and the owners don't realize that if it's a 337 on, it's a 337 off when that equipment is removed from the airplane. So that's a good point. Any other questions? Okay. Andy and I were talking a little bit earlier, and the subject of complaints came up and how that works. Our office, during the season, we get numerous phone calls, complaints about big yellow airplanes, helicopters, some big white airplanes flying around that are, according to them, are doing some things wrong. No matter what the complaint is, we have to answer it. If it comes in anonymous through the hotline, or if somebody just makes a phone call about an ag operator, we have to answer them. What we do is our management will receive that complaint, and they'll assign it to one of the principals or an ops guy in the office, and we'll normally call the complainant to find out what happened. And sometimes they're very legitimate, because they'll provide telling video with an N number, and you can almost see the whites of the operator's eyes as he's flying over the house. So sometimes they're that blatant, but most often than not, it's hard to substantiate the complaint. It's just people that are very mad and upset that the airplane is spraying around their house. And sometimes we'll get a picture of it, and the airplane will be just tiny, grainy off in the distance. But we do have to deal with it, and we'll normally call you for an explanation, and it's usually never a problem. The operators that we found in this area, obviously there is no one going out of their way to make anybody mad or be unsafe. Like Andy said, the pilot is really the last guy that really wants to run into a house or anything like that when the complaint is lodged. So we have operators that, if it's okay with the complainant, we give them their phone number. The operator will reach out to them, and usually they develop a good relationship.
They'll talk to them, they'll tell them why they're doing what they're doing, and they'll come up with some kind of plan if they're going to be flying around their house or their property. And it usually works out to be a really good thing for you guys and the good neighbor policy of the applicators. So did I cover that well enough, Andy? That's kind of our system.
I think so. Beyond, what if there is no resolution or the anger, like, I actually had one 2 summers ago. Todd investigated that one, and that guy was quite hostile.
Yeah.
He did not want to provide his name, didn't want Todd to forward his name to me, and would not give out his name to be contacted.
Yeah.
So that one ended up to be kind of a stalemate.
So what we do in a case like that, where we talk to the operator and we realize that the complainant is just really mad, and there's no way that we're going to satisfy him on his complaint, we will normally send out a letter to the complainant saying, look, we were unable to substantiate your complaint. We'll keep the complaint open should anything happen, in the future with that. But it goes under the scenario, sometimes you just can't win. And we have to end it with a letter just saying we can't substantiate it. The operator is doing everything he can to avoid your property. But thank you for your interest in aviation safety, but we're just going to have to move on from this. And we'll send the operator a letter basically stating the same. That, look, we investigated this complaint. We were unable to substantiate it. And moving forward, there's just really nothing else that we can do. And, there's many times we'll just get the same guy calling in. And we'll just have to deal with it as best we can. Law enforcement will get involved because he'll get everybody involved that he possibly can. You just can't win in those scenarios. But you cover it with documentation. That's really the best that you can do. Okay? So if there are no other questions.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just...
Okay. Andy and I spoke earlier in the week or the week before, and the issue with some of the accidents that we've been out on, the issue of safety came up, and I was asked to do a little bit on that. So I think that'll kind of tie in with what you're talking about, Andy.
Yeah. Well, by the way, my name is Andy Tybert, and Perry and I have met last summer under some bad circumstances. We'll get into that a little bit later. But with that, along with that, I wanted to provide some information that I have come up with on just a personal checklist for spring. Right down to the pilot in the airplane. And I had several items, and again, this is my own. I didn't come up with this out of any book or anything like that. But first of all, clear your calendar, clear your schedule. I have house projects. I'm involved with other organizations. I kind of start right about now. I started really pushing a lot of that stuff aside. I'm not available. My focus, my attention needs to be on the job, and it's time to push some of that stuff that just doesn't matter aside, that can wait. So, number 2 I had written down is focus on your task at hand. It's time to go to work. It isn't time to be flying around doing this job and thinking about what you need to do elsewhere. The one part here was develop a personal minimum. I saw a couple people in the room here that attended the PASS program at the NDAAA conference in Grand Forks just a week and a half ago. And out of attending passes, probably for the, maybe 19 out of the last 21 years, past programs, I'd have to say this past program that was presented in Grand Forks was probably the best past program, most applicable to the pilot in the aircraft that I have ever seen. And it had to do with, there was a lot about accidents and what causes them. And, you know, and things like that, like controlled flight into terrain, diversion of attention. I had some other stuff written down here. And they had a long session on flying, you know, visual meteorological conditions with flight into IMC conditions. And we had a bad accident in the state. It led to a fatality about, was that 3 or 4 years ago? I think it was 3 years ago. And that one that one did hit home with me quite hard, because the pilot that was killed in that accident started the same year I did, and in fact he started in Minto with the operator there, and I'm operating in Grafton, and we talked, you know, we're both new guys and getting going and everything like that. And the past presenter, after that pilot left North Dakota, went to Wisconsin, he worked with that past presenter. So he had a very personal touch with that incident also. And yeah, there's just some stuff, and again, the diversion of attention, I'll be the first one to admit I'm guilty of it. Guilty as charged of cell phone use while flying, texting while flying. They're just, you know, I've set up some minimums that's just stuff I'm not gonna do anymore. The phone call can just wait, you know, and texts, they don't need to be answered. That's why somebody texted you anyway. What am I, even if it is an emergency, what am I gonna do? It isn't the time. So again, I'll just revert a little bit back to that visual flight into IMC conditions. I have been a couple times. The past presenter at that thing said when your heart rate is up, when you start heavy breathing, well, lo and behold, I had my mic here, and I can hear back in my ANR going. I knew I was in there, and you know, I was just lucky enough to be one that was able to get out of that. And you get out of it, and you get back to the airport, and you think, boy, I was glad to make it out of that alive. I hope I don't do that again. So it's just time to you know, time to reflect on some of those things. We've all been there. We've all been in these bad situations. And I had a kind of a saying. I said there's only two kinds of pilots. Ones who have been in these situations and bad situations and been there on the edge of death or bad habits, and liars. So the last one I had on here is the NAAA has a saying. It says, ferry at 5 and stay alive. 500 feet ferrying. We still see pilots around the area once in a while. They're on their way to or from a field at treetop level. With these turbine airplanes, it's so easy to, you know, any of these airplanes, whether it's full, empty, it's easy to climb out. It's easy to bring it back to flight idle and come back down in a heck of a hurry. So it's no big deal. It literally takes 10 seconds longer. And if you have any distance in ferrying, it's just a good idea to get up. And even reprogramming a GPS, it's time to, you know, get up and clear your area a little bit, then do your adjustments and resetting of your GPS, which kind of leads to last summer. August 10th was a really, really bad day for me, really bad day. I got up in the morning, the wind was supposed to come up. I was trying to punch out 3 loads myself in the morning, and I started getting texts and whatever else, which I did not answer that day for whatever reason. I did not answer them. I got back and I landed at the airport though, and the loader at Linton, where I go to oftentimes, started saying something's wrong. Something's wrong. She's on the ambulance crew, and she started getting notification that there was a plane crash south of Linton. And she said, I just fear the worst. And that morning I found out that a good dear friend of mine was killed in a plane crash, and hit a wire, which if you guys ever saw a map of the field he was spraying, the wire is some distance away from the end of the field. And this is me speaking solely. I have no basis whatsoever. I wasn't there. I'm not intimate with the investigation of it or whatever, but something tells me that he just got out of the end of the field that he was spraying and maybe took a quick glance and then either started to mess with his cell phone or his GPS or something. From anything I see or known of him, I don't believe there was any previous medical conditions. I don't think there was anything wrong with the airplane, anything like that, because all indications are he went straight and level, full power into this power line, which from there things did not go well, and he was killed that morning at about 7:45, just roughly, and that one really hit home with me. So yeah, with that, I guess I don't have any other details on that accident or anything else, and anything else you care to add in to that? Yeah. That day, I think it was later that morning, or possibly even the next morning, is the first time I actually met Perry in person, who was an investigator on that accident, and we've chatted several times, and then I saw his name on this as a presenter, and was kind of delighted to work with you today. So thank you. Any questions from anyone?
Yep. Yep. All right.
Thanks, Andy. When Andy and I spoke about this and worked the accident with him, this actually has nothing to do, well, not directly with Mike's accident, but we thought it'd be a good idea just to do a little bit of a safety brief. The human factors thing, I know when I was in industry, when somebody mentioned human factors to me, I wanted to run and hide because it was always kind of a boring subject. But until I started going out and doing accidents, it really took on a whole new light about the human factors thing. And so I kind of picked one based on just some of the accidents I've been to just in the last couple of years, and it's complacency. So it's just a few things, a few bullet points. This won't take long, but a few bullet points that I've taken off Google or wherever I could find it, but they just kind of pertain to the accidents that I've been on, whether they're Part 91 accidents or accidents under 135, or even the A guys under 137. It all applies. And I'll go through these quick. It's just I took the things I guess I thought were interesting off of this. So the complacency it's a natural function of the brain. Obviously, there's not a flaw in your personality at all. It's just a natural function. Most of our day-to-day behavior is automated. It happens without conscious or deliberate thought. The brain is designed to automate repetitive behavior. So remember that, the brain is designed to automate repetitive behavior. It's kind of interesting what I found out about that. So the definition of the human factor is the one definition that I found that I thought was most interesting: common human error preconditions, or conditions that can act as precursors to accidents or incidents. So conditions that can act as a precursor to an accident or incident. I find that so true when I've done the investigation on these accidents. They can influence people to make mistakes. This is just one of the 12 of the dirty dozen that most every presentation talks about. Here's one of the examples, and this has happened to, I'm sure, most people. A trip to Minneapolis, and you're driving along and you're wondering, as you're solving the world's problems, did I pass Fergus Falls yet? Did I go past Alexandria? I have no idea. I'm halfway into the trip and suddenly I have no idea where I'm at. Or I get there and I can't recall how I got home. Got home safely and everything worked out fine, but I can't recall how I got there. You become complacent with that part of driving because it's an automated behavior of the brain. You're just functioning on autopilot. And it has to be that way, and I'll show you why. So it says the brain can handle routine actions without conscious guidance. Repetitive tasks become automated to free up attention to things that are new, unusual, or threatening. So if they're not new, and they're not unusual, and they're not threatening when you're going through your day-to-day automation, you don't notice it. It's a fact. If it were not that way, we would be overwhelmed by the simplest tasks. Think about that if your brain didn't do the automated behavior or autopilot thing. Everything you do on a day-to-day basis, you'd have to be doing it for the first time. That means putting on your shoes and talking how the rabbit goes around the tree and all that sort of thing. Or driving. You'd have to get in and start the thing up and drive as if it were the first time you've done it, because your brain's not capable of that autopilot. If that weren't the case, day-to-day tasks would just become terrible because you'd be doing everything for the first time. You'd just be overwhelmed by the simplest things. People who are repeatedly exposed to dangerous situations, police, firefighters, pilots, mechanics, become less concerned and cautious about them. We become complacent about our personal safety from repeated exposure to threatening situations. So ag pilots, from my point of view, because I have never sprayed before, I fly a hot air balloon, so things happen at 4 to 5 miles per hour. It's pretty easy. But you guys are running 2 to 3 feet off the ground at a fairly good speed. You don't have the luxury of altitude. You don't have the luxury of getting up in the air and taking time to look for a place to land when the engine goes quiet. You become a little bit complacent to that because you do it every day. You don't really think much about the dangers of it because you're always doing it. But yet, guys like me, when we talk about it, it looks like a pretty dangerous job to me, but not to you guys because you're doing it all the time. You become complacent about your personal safety from repeated exposure to threatening situations because you're exposed to it every time you get in the airplane and spray. The way to fix that, again, keeping this short, the way to fix that, or in theory, analyze small mistakes, not just the serious ones. You analyze the fact that you'd gotten text messages, or texting maybe while you were flying, or reading text, or messing with the GPS. And you were able to sit back and analyze that once you got back, saying, you know what, maybe after Mike's accident, I'm not sure, but you analyzed that and you decided that's something I'm not going to do anymore. Because you'd become so good at maybe flying that you could do that. It was just emotion to pick up the phone and text or do whatever you needed to do because your automated behavior flying the airplane has taken over. Now you're on autopilot and you can do all sorts of other things. But analyze the small mistakes, not just the serious ones, and you may come up with something in your routine that you've done forever that may save your life. You may come up with something that you've never thought about before. Like, I think I need to stop doing this, or I think I need to include this in my day-to-day checklist because it happened to a friend of mine. I've done accidents. I did one in actually an operator in Florida. He owned a 137 operation where he trained pilots to fly for ag, and he had an ag school. This guy was high time. And he'd flown this field with a tree sticking up in the middle of it many, many times for many years. Last year, he hit the tree. And he's not around to talk about why, but I just have to believe that it had something to do with the automated behavior, the autopilot, the function that he just really didn't see the tree anymore. It just became something that was out there that he really didn't think about it, and the one time he drove into it. I had an interesting situation where I was able to talk to a pilot that hit a 75-foot, 1-inch wire on a power line. He'd flown over these wires for years. This guy had flown in the Air Force, flown jets, high-time pilot, and he was in his ag plane going back to the airport. And he was complacent. He wasn't sure. He'd had a hard day. He was lacking sleep, and he flew directly into the line. No evasive maneuver, nothing. It took the right wing off the airplane. At 75 feet, he did a 270-degree spiral and hit the ground. And all he could think of is, I'm dead. That's what he kept saying to him in the seconds that he had before he hit the ground. Well, after I talked to him, I asked him, what happened? You've done this so many times. And he just said, it's the one time where I didn't even recollect spraying the field that I just got done spraying. No memory of it. Kind of like driving, and you get to Minneapolis, you have no memory of how you got there. It was the same thing with him flying that airplane. He had no recollection of spraying the field that he just got done doing, and drove his airplane right into a power line. So the complacency thing, the autopilot function, it happens to the most experienced guys, and we all know somebody that's been high time that we thought would never ever have an accident, and we've lost some of those guys. So it's important to step back every now and then and look at your situation and look what you do. You can discuss that with the people that you work with. You look for signs of complacency in other people, accidents that we've experienced. Word gets around to what happens in those accidents eventually. Take that, analyze it, see if there's something positive you can do with it in your daily routine. So that's all I have. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to hear them. Make sure and reach out to us. FAA.gov, you can find our office, and you can see all the inspectors that work there. Email us, call us, whatever, but we'd sure love to see you at the office, and we'd sure love to talk to you if you have anything that you'd like to run through.
You got to stay here. I have to put a plug in for the FAA here too, and I've mentioned this to Perry also. About 15 years ago or so, the FAA went to their terminology was a method of compliance. Mm-hmm. And to Perry's point about give us a call, we want to work with you. We want to have you do the right thing. And a lot of people are still kind of under the, I don't know, they still have the impression that they're kind of the henchmen, they're the enemy. And really, I think they really, you know, I've had a very great experience in either ops side, maintenance side. Been very, very helpful. So thank you for. We
are actually here to help.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we are. And
you're not the Friends Against Aviation?
No.
Oh, okay.
We're here to promote aviation and aviation safety industry,
Yes.
and our office is really good about that. There's great management there.
I really think so too, and it really I think it makes your job easier and ours easier if everybody kind of pushing the apple cart in the same direction.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Well said. Thank you, Andy.
all right.
Oh, you got more stuff. Okay.
One last thing on maintenance issues. This is going to be rather short because this season I actually did not have very nothing to report. There was no smoking gun in the shop, anything like that. But industry-wise, there is a couple things that you know, everybody hears supply chain issues, and that's the one thing that, if I have to say, you may want to protect yourself a little bit with supply chain issues in the aviation world in our upcoming season. I've heard of air filters that are very difficult to get. We called last year just for a hopper lid seal on the airplane, and they've been out since last summer. And I finally just got a roll of the hopper lid seal in stock right now. And like I mentioned, air filters, the foam air filter on the pressure cowl for an air tractor, they were out of those since last fall. They had in 3. Well, we ordered 3. They had several more than that, but they were up about $130 from last year's price, but at least they have them. The airplane isn't going anywhere without them. I understand that flap motors are difficult to get. If you guys fly an air tractor, I don't think you're going anywhere without a flap motor. And they went from about $500 to, I heard, anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400. But so you just may want to shop around a little bit and put in a few of these items and help protect yourself a little bit. Make sure you have them, you know, or at least call and guarantee that the shop that takes care of your airplane, if you're not taking care of your own, has these items in stock for you. The only other thing that I ran into this year, I ended up at our conference, the NDAAA conference, sitting down with, they happen to be competitive engine maintenance shops. You know, one was CD and the other one was Standard Aero, and representatives of them were talking about a kind of a common, unique problem that is beginning to show up, and it has to do with fuel control units on these turbine engines, even though they're completely separate. So the common denominator there would be the fuel that we're getting now, and it tends to hold water in, more than it used to. And it has to do with the introduction of renewable fuel source, or like soybean oil or something that is incorporated in on Jet A. And I don't know if that stuff is, they didn't have an explanation for it, but it tends to be corrosive. And when we go in the off season and our airplanes go dormant for, you know, six months or so, this is causing big problems. So, and especially with the water in the fuel, that alone is what they're attributing the corrosion to. So make sure that it might even be worthwhile to at least clean out your fuel filters or have your mechanic service out or 100-hour your engine right away in the fall, so that that water isn't sitting there for 6 months and then it goes to work on it and stuff like that. So, okay, well that's about all I had on maintenance issues. If anybody has any questions for me, or
let's give Andy a round of applause.
thank you.
And I just really want to thank Perry and Andy. Great presentations, and I really appreciate you sharing that information, sharing personal experience. I knew that pilot. I knew the pilot 3 or 4 years ago as well, and you know, that's why we get together and have these conversations, so that we can work together to prevent them, because obviously losing one pilot is one too many, and we don't want anybody to become a statistic. And so, well, with that, that's the end of the presentation today. So thank you so much for all of you who are attending in person. Thank you so much for all of you tuning in online. And I hope everybody has a successful and safe spraying season here in 2022. So thank you so much.